And yet the Bible gives us one of those. The Bible's greatest anti-hero is a man named Jonah. And I want to meet you in Jonah chapter 1, verse 1. And I want to introduce you to a dark, dark character. Now, for most of us, if I say, what do you know about the story of Jonah, what comes into play? A whale. See, he's not all by himself. He's got himself a partner. Big fish in the middle of an ocean. And we believe in the power of this story, and we believe in it partially, A, because it's in the Bible, but we believe it, B, because Jesus mentioned it. And Jesus doesn't mention a whole lot of Old Testament stories, just a handful here and there. But he does mention Jonah. In the prophecy of his own death, resurrection, Jesus says, as Jonah went into the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so must the Son of Man go into the heart of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. And so Jesus gives credence, at least to the story of Jonah in his audience, that Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale. And most of us, if I went even outside of the church today, went to the coffee house and said, hey, what do you know about Jonah? Most people would say, isn't he the guy that got swallowed by the fish? And that's pretty much the end of what we understand about Jonah. Now, when I was introduced to Jonah growing up, remember again, I've been around the gospel my whole life, so I heard a lot of Jonah's stories, sermons, Sunday school lessons, children's church illustrations, the little felt whale on the board. VBS songs about him, big fat funny looking whale with a big smile on his face, and Jonah riding a surfboard next to the whale. When I heard of Jonah, Jonah was always a reluctant prophet. Jonah was always a guy who had a heart for people. He's an evangelist. And God calls him to go to Nineveh, and Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh. This is how it was always taught to me, okay? Jonah doesn't want to go to Nineveh because Nineveh's full of bad guys, and they might kill him. And hey, Jonah's just like the rest of us. He's just a little bit scared for his life. And who wants to just go walk into the belly of the beast? So God brings an actual beast and swallows him up and says, see, you can survive the belly of a whale, then you can survive the belly of Nineveh. And he vomits him up on the beach, and Jonah goes and preaches, and everybody gets saved. And then we've got a good VBS t-shirt. Everyone lives happily ever after. Way to go, Jonah. You've just been introduced to the sanitized, I would dare say, Marvel Avengers version of the Jonah story. Jonah was just turned into a hero. Jonah is not a hero. Jonah is an anti-hero. Jonah is fearful and afraid, but not in the way that you think he is. Jonah's not afraid of Nineveh, although he might need to be. Nineveh is a nation full of warriors. Nineveh is so paganistic, so heathenistic, they skin their victims alive in war. Take those skins and dry them in the sun and then stretch them over pieces of wood. They created Old Testament leather furniture. And they did it as spoils of war. They decapitated their victims, dried their skulls in the sun, and built a mountain of skulls outside the eastern gate of Nineveh so that when you walked through the gate, you knew what would await you if they didn't like you. This is the city that Jonah has been called to go preach to. He is not to say one word to them about their sin. One of the spectacular literary things that happen in the book of Jonah is there is no mention of sin, but there is a lot of mention of wickedness. God doesn't say go to Jonah and preach because they've sinned against me. Sin is a transgression of the law. Nineveh doesn't have the law. Nineveh's Gentile. They're not Jewish. But Nineveh has wickedness, and wickedness has nothing to do with the law. Wickedness has nothing to do with things being off limits. Wickedness has to do with the condition of the heart. And what is going forth out of Nineveh is murderous rage. And it hurts the heart of God. And so he says to Jonah, I want you to go down to Nineveh and I want you to preach to them. And again, Jonah might have good reason to be scared of the Ninevites because their city takes 3 days on foot to get from one side to the other. And when you went in on day one and saw the mountain of skulls and you smell the burning of flesh and you see that new leather furniture, you know exactly what happens to people that tick Nineveh off on day 2 of a 3-day walkthrough. So if anybody has reason to be scared, man, it's Jonah. Why would you want to go to Nineveh, this nation of pagans and heathens and idol worshipers who sacrifice their own and definitely their enemies? But that's not Jonah's problem. Jonah's not scared to go to Nineveh because he's scared for his life. Jonah's scared to go to Nineveh for a whole different reason, because Jonah is the classic anti-hero. Jonah wants nothing to do with Nineveh because Jonah knows God. And he knows the power of the Word of God. So let's watch how this story unfolds. We're not going to read all 4 chapters. We just want to read a few verses here and there to help lay this out. Watch from the top of the book now. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry out against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. Watch the transitory conjunction at the top of the word but. This is a rebuttal. This runs the other way. All right? But Jonah arose to flee from Tarshish, from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare and went down into it to go with them to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. And we'll stop here because this is the perfect introduction. You've just watched your hero run the opposite way of his commission. Nineveh is to the northeast, and Tarshish is in the west, on the far western coast of Spain. And Jonah hears from God and says, instead of going to Nineveh, how about I take a vacation to Spain first? Because who doesn't want a vacation to Spain, particularly when my alternative is to go into a city that is going to cut my head off and skin me alive? And so Jonah goes the other way to flee from Tarshish, from the presence of the Lord, and he goes down to Joppa. And I love the literary device used right here by whoever it was who penned Jonah, and we don't know, because before the book's over, I think you're going to realize it ain't Jonah. Because you wouldn't write this stuff about yourself. I don't know who did it to him, but whoever did it to him does a great literary device here, because when you run from God, you always run down, you never run up. Life is a system of orienting ourselves upward. We're moving upward to better things, onward to a star, up to the top of a mountain, across a valley. None of us brag about going backwards. You know, I met this girl and we're going to get married, and I feel like it'll be a good step backwards for me. I feel like it's what I need in my life. Things have been going too well. I need a challenge. And she's going to give it to me. I'm going to have to work every day of my life to get a word in edgewise or to be happy. I feel like all of my money and my talent are going to be drained and gone. But I feel like I'll be a better man for it on the other side. No one does it. We don't ever brag about going backwards. We don't brag about going down. We don't brag about going away. In fact, the Bible is anti-go backwards. It's anti-go away. Moses turns and looks at the Egyptian army and faces the people of Israel and says, and the Red Sea's at his back, and says to God, what am I going to do? The people are going to kill me and the Egyptians are going to kill me. And God says, what are you talking to me for? Turn around and face the sea. That's an amazing moment by God to man. What are you talking to me for? Turn around and face the sea. Who do you think you are, a man who walks backwards?